Today we are going to illustrate how we install the optional tail dragger pull handle assembly. The first step will be to locate the plate in place. You'll want to mark the location of the 3/4 inch hole on the skin using that doubler as a guide, and you'll need to drill the 6th hole, number 30 size hole in the skin. Do that for both sides. Uncleco the doubler plate, and as accurately as possible, mark the center line of the hole, that 3/4 inch hole. Start with a small drill, number 40 for example. Work your way up. We're going to use ultimately a uni-bit that has a 3/4 inch final size. Don't drill all the way through to 3/4. Drill up to the last step before it, and then we will reinstall the doubler plate and match the skin hole to the doubler hole. Once you are one step away from the final hole size, cleco the pull handle doubler back in place. And finalize the 3/4 inch hole. And that should be the final size for our tubing. Repeat this step for the other side as well. Once both pull handle doublers are clecoed in place, you will need to trim your 3/4 inch tube to fit perfectly flush with both surfaces of those doubler plates. An easy way to do this is mark the center line of that 3/4 inch tube. And then mark the very top side of that hole in the skin in the doubler plate. Position the tube so that that line coincides at the very top. This will just make it easier to trim this, and I'll show you in a minute why we do this. Let a little bit stick out the bottom side of it, 1/8 of an inch or so is sufficient, and then mark the perimeter. Because the vertical stabilizer is airfoil shaped, this tube will have an angle to it. So go ahead and mark the other side, and we'll come back and we'll cut this piece. Okay, here we have rough cut our tube. We have our lines that are at an angle because it's a tapered part. We're going to use a disc sander, and that line that we drew on the tube, we want it to always be as vertical as possible. That way we know that we're going to taper it perfectly and it won't be off. So we just need to match up. I'm not sure if you can see that here in the camera. We're going to match those angles. Here we go. Okay, once you are done with sanding the angles on your tube, deburr it. You can You can test fit it. We don't want it to be undersized, but just slightly larger is fine. It will get final shape in a later step. There is a doubler piece that's going to fit over this tube. We need to mark the center line of this tube, similar to what we did with the first one. Mark your center line. And then sand one end only at an approximate angle. This angle is not critical at this moment. It's just to get us closer to where we need to be. So mark the center line and sand an angle to it. Okay, once you have cut the angle on one side of the doubler tube, take the remaining piece of tubing that you cut originally off the inside tube support, insert it, and then thread the doubler tube over it. And at this point, you can take a marker and mark the exact shape. This time you want to get as close as possible on that angle. I got this piece pretty close the first time, so I won't need to make any adjustments, but you can always mark it and then make a final sand which will be closest to the shape of the angle that you need. At this point, we're going to remove the doubler on one side only. Set that aside. This next step is pretty critical. You're going to mark and cut a 7/8 diameter hole in the skin only on one side, not the doubler, only on the skin. The easy way to do that is position that doubler tube over it, mark on the skin, and then use a uni-bit. In this case, you need a larger size uni-bit, a 7/8 uni-bit, to cut that hole, one side of the skin only. Okay, once you have cut your 7/8 hole in one side of the skin, use your longer piece of 3/4 to center it, and with the end that you had originally tapered, the only end that's tapered actually, fit that into the bottom of the skin, and you can rotate it and find the exact fit on the opposite side of the skin. I'll show you what I mean. Okay, here we'll take a peek. You can look at the bottom through one of the open holes in the bottom of the vertical. I've got a flashlight in there so you can see. But the idea, let's see if I can capture that, there you go, is to rotate the tube until you have the best fit. At that point, that is the position of that tube. Now you can take your marker, your Sharpie, and mark the shape of the tube on the outside, which will be our next cut. Okay, so mark the exact shape of this taper on the outside tube, and we'll cut that off, and that has to be flush with the outside skin. Okay, now we have finished with the inside doubler tube. It'll fit perfectly flush with the skin. We want it flush. We're almost done here. One of the last steps is going to be, we have to now, with either JB Weld or DP460, an adhesive that's good for aluminum, we have got to glue these two pieces together. And we've got our mark here, such as that. Our mark lines up there. Overall, what we want equal amount of hangover on both ends. We're going to do the very final trimming of the ends of the inside tube once it's all together and riveted. But we do need to glue this very thoroughly, so we'll get that glued and come back and finish this step. Okay, our tubes have dried overnight. They're glued. The next step is going to be to install it, final install it, and you can rivet the doubler plates on as well. So let's get those riveted, both sides, and we'll come back with the last step. Okay, we have riveted the doubler plates on both sides, and we do have a small bit of that inner tube protruding above the surface of the plates. I like a narrow file. I have a triangular file that works well. It fits between the rivets. Work patiently at removing material and just achieve a nice flush fit with a plate, and that completes the assembly of the pull handle.